But before that time, yes, there had been, but not during the Renaissance. But the women were active in business.
Mm-hmm.
They were scholars. One of them was smart enough to be considered learned, so that the responsa literature mentions her as being somewhere where people sent their questions, the Jewish world sent their questions for a high level answer, which a responsa was. They were bankers. We have the one that I mentioned on a previous program, Donna Gracia Nassi, but we also had Benvenida Abravanel, who ran a bank after her husband died. She was not only ran a bank, she ran what I call the UJA
Did you say
of the
Abravanel?
Renaissance. Abravanel, yes. She ran a bank. She was where she would ransom the Jews, refugees from the pirates that used to play on them, used to have
blackmail them?
Take them prisoner on the high seas in the Mediterranean, and she would hustle up the ransom money by collecting it from all over the place and freeing these Jews.
Her name was again?
Benvenida Abravanel. She was a member of the great Abravanel rabbinic and banking family that went into the 20th century. There are plenty of Abravanels around today, too.
Yeah, oh, yes. And they make a good wine.
Yeah.
Now, where did the Jews mostly escape to or flee to?
When they left Italy after this period, they went where they could. Some of them went north to the settlements that were growing in Poland and in Eastern Europe in general. And Eastern Europe had become hospitable to them, the ones that went north, because Eastern Europe was one of the latest of the areas of Europe to become Christianized. Poland didn't have a Christian king until the 1100s. So it was of late, and they didn't have the same prejudices, Lithuania, Poland, the Ukraine, as they had in Western Europe. An awful lot of them went to the Muslim countries. They fled to the Ottoman Empire because the Muslims were great friends and welcomed the Jews and all their learning, and felt that it could give them a merchant class and a bureaucratic class that they didn't have. Some of them went south to Morocco. Morocco has an extraordinary Jewish history.
Yes.
I just come back from Morocco.
Did you?
Went to some remarkable places there where you see the flowering of Jewish learning and community in Morocco.
Today?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to do a segment on that.
It was wonderful. Of course, most of them have left now because they left at the time when Morocco was independent and the Jewish state was begun. But yes, so that they found places to go.
Okay, now this is one of the oldest communities in our history. I mean, of course, you could go back to Rome, but in our more like recent history, that's really quite relevant to us, the Italian community. And it impacts on us very directly, culturally and all that. Yet we have a dearth of knowledge on this history. We have more about other periods of time. And if we could just kind of look at that once again, why that is so.
Because Jewish history, as many professors have said, tends to get written by people who have an interest in their ancestors. So that in this country there's been a tremendous amount written on Eastern Europe. There's been a tremendous amount written on the Holocaust, because that's where they can trace some of their family back to. I mean, how many Italian Jews do you know here?
I know only a few.
Okay, there you are. There are. Because in modern times there wasn't that large numbers and large communities. There were small communities of Jews. They never really recovered from the ghetto period there. They fled. They weren't there anymore. So that if you haven't got people today who say, yes, you know, my ancestors were in this place or that place, they tend to lose interest in doing any digging about them. And Sicily is rich in Jewish history, and it's very hard, I'm told, to get any students to do any studies on the Jews of Sicily.
Because they personally don't have
They
relatives
have no
that they
connection.
could trace.
They can't feel any interest, any connection to the Jews of Sicily.
Yes, it was such, and yet it was such a wonderful, incredible period of history. It was I would say, you know, when you hear the music of the Jewish synagogue in those days, it sounds not so dissimilar to, you know, the sounds of the choirs in the churches and all of the harmonic, you know, multi voices that are in the music. So you see that the Jews were right in there with the the music of the times.
Well, yeah, they were, but in many ways they affected the time. You see, there was a two-way street here during the Renaissance. The Jewish culture affected and broadened the whole music and culture of the Renaissance.
Well, that's very interesting what you're saying, because that part we don't get. What were some of the salient ways that the Jews influenced the Renaissance? You started
with Rossi.
Right.
His music became part of the musical canon of Western Europe. And some of the, because I'm not a musical historian, but a lot of that, his techniques became part of the classical.
He wasn't just echoing something that he heard?
No.
Okay.
The Jews affected and had an impact upon the learning. It wasn't that they were reflecting it and absorbing it for themselves, but it also had an impact on Jewish life, because it was said to be one of the first times that Jews had participated on an almost equal basis, and so that their own culture was reformed.
Yes, yes. Well, I think this is a very important message, because going through high school myself, when I heard the history, I never realized the role that the Jew was part and parcel with the flowering of culture in the Renaissance, and I always thought it was kind of them just kind of echoing back, but they were really quite there on the first floor, ground floor. And
input as much as take out.
Yeah, you should really get some of this into the curriculum of schools, because I think it's very important for kids to have an identity in that history. When they hear of the bubonic plagues, or they should know, or the Dark Ages, that it wasn't necessarily the Dark Ages for the Jew. You hear the Renaissance, it was not just a Gentile history, it was a
but there's another reason we don't hear about it, I think, thinking about what you're saying, because the Ashkenazi world, where the American Jew gets so much of its history from,
yes,
was not a great participant in this at all.
Yes.
It was cut off from this for lots of reasons. And so the Ashkenazi communities up in Germany or Poland weren't directly affected in the same way. And so if we get our Jewish history from that, we're not going to see that connection,
yes,
except the few of the communities that sent their students to the University of Padua for medical education.
We're talking with author Andree Brooks, lecturer. It's such a pleasure to have you here once again with Rabbi Rock, and I learned so much from you, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom.